Faces of Abortion is the only television program of its kind that shares the powerful, real-life stories of women, men, and families who have suffered through the destruction of abortion. You will be hearing powerful stories from women and men and families throughout the nations. Faces of Abortion touches lives and changes hearts in over 115 nations. You will also be given practical steps on how you can end abortion.
So it just overwhelmed me. And I thought the only way to escape the pain was to take my life.
I had a fear that I wouldn't be able to have my own children.
It brings heartache. It brings hurt.
And I knew they were tearing my baby apart.
I remember the cold feeling of the room.
I remember laying there and I just said to myself that I will never forgive myself for what I'm doing.
I believe that my life was spared that night just so that I could be here right now and say abortion hurts women.
Welcome to Faces of Abortion. I'm your host, Cindy Collins, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, Alan Parker, who is president of the Justice Foundation, and Clayton Trotter, who is general counsel of the Justice Foundation, and our very special studio guest, Kay.
Cindy, we've got an unusual program this week because we're going to be able to hear from Todd and Vicki share their abortion experience as a couple and how it impacted them. And we are also very excited to have Kay from Idaho with us as well. And so we're going to get an interesting view from participants from what abortion is like.
Thank you, Alan. Now let's break away and hear the special story of Todd and Vicki in their own words.
Hi, my name is Todd. This is my wife, Vicki. And 27 years ago, we had an abortion. So we are post-abortive. And it was a decision that was not very wise. It was a bad choice on our part. We were dating at the time. And even though we did know Jesus as our personal Lord and Savior, we made the two bad choices. And the first choice was to have premarital sex. And the second poor choice that we made was to have an abortion when we realized that Vicki was pregnant. And we were both very fearful of telling our parents. So the fear of telling our parents was stronger than the fear of God at that time. And so that's when we went ahead and had the abortion.
I can remember the day that I went to the abortion clinic. Todd drove me, and as I went into the waiting room, there were many other women there that were waiting. So I look back, it didn't seem strange that day, but it seems strange now that nobody talked with you about what was going to happen. Nobody told you what was going to happen. It went very quick. It seemed like a quick process. And I remember leaving that day very numb. I didn't have any feeling toward it. I knew that it was a past experience at that point, and I kept it buried for a long, long time. Never talked about it. Never even shared with Todd about what happened in that room. I knew at that particular time that it was a poor choice, but it seemed to us that it was the only choice. For us, along with being fearful of telling our parents, I had just been hired to teach and coach, and I knew that if I was pregnant, I wouldn't be able to do that. So not only was it a poor choice, but it was a selfish choice, very selfish on both of our parts. to put our lives in front of the baby that God had given to us at that particular time.
So for 26 years, we never spoke about it between Vicki and myself. It was an area in our lives that we knew we couldn't talk about, because if we did, it would bring up all the hurt and the shame and the guilt of having the abortion. And there were many times during the night that I would wake up and be crying because of the lost child that we made the decision to abort. And still, we were unable to talk about it because the fear of hurting each other again. We didn't want to go through that. So we kept building a wall around our feelings and around the terrible thing that we did. And so a mutual friend of ours told us about Rachel's Vineyard that she had seen on the internet. And she recommended that we go to the weekend to help start the recovery process, or the mourning process, the grieving process of our child. And so we did go. I was very nervous about the prospect of myself being the only man there. But as soon as we arrived at the retreat, there were both men and women there to welcome us and give us a hug and let us know that this was the first step back to recovery, back to that long road. And it was probably the best thing that we've ever done, because it helped us to start down the process of healing, drawing back together again as husband and wife, and allow us to be in touch with our feelings, but also through the weekend, the counselors, the ministers, the priests, they showed us through the Word that God still loved us, and that He is there for us, and that He does forgive us for what we've done, because we've asked Him to forgive us. And even though it's been about 9 months since the weekend, we are feeling so much better. We're drawing closer to God again. And as a couple, we are drawing together as a couple that we should have been from the very beginning.
I knew, as being a Christian, that God had forgiven me. What I hadn't been able to do is to forgive myself. There was a lot of self-hatred, a lot of shame and guilt that was just buried. And through the process of Rachel's Vineyard, I had never talked to another woman that had even had an abortion. I was able to see that I wasn't the only one, that there were others, and it started a tremendous transformation, a healing process in Jesus of coming back and loving myself for who I was, and that I wasn't this awful, terrible person that I'd always thought and claimed myself to be. But we had also bridged a huge barrier the two of us had had for many, many years. And for the first time in 27 years,